Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today, we're jumping into a compilation of our last 5 ProRevenge videos. We aim these videos at people who are working or driving or things like that so that they don't have to change videos as often. I hope you enjoy. Let's jump right in. Our first story today comes to us from Free Bass. Never mess with your IT guy, especially in the middle of the Iraqi desert. Let's jump right in. This is a fairly lengthy story and it has a pretty good payoff in the end. I'm not sure if this qualifies as ProRevenge or nuclear, so I'll let you be the judge. Backstory. In 2003, I was the Director of Information Technology and Communications on a project tasked with securing Saddam's major weapons storage sites throughout Iraq, performing a comprehensive inventory of said weapons, and then destroying what we'd found. I was based at one of the largest weapons storage sites in the country, so our mission there was monumental. Blowing up 100 tons of weapons 6 days a week, Scud missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, anti-shipping missiles, all varieties of rockets, grenades, and mines, heavy to light, was going to take years. In order to accomplish this, we had to first build base defenses and secure an area the size of a small county. Once that was complete, we built a major support base in the middle of the Iraqi desert from scratch and all the infrastructure to support it. We're talking housing, cafeteria with full commercial kitchen, office buildings, electrical, water, and sewage systems, toilet, showers, trailers, recreational facilities, an 8-bay full-service vehicle shop and motor pool, and most importantly, in my opinion, IT and communication systems, radio, network infrastructures, servers, VoIP phones, all connected to the outside world via satellite uplink. Story. All of these facilities housed bomb and explosive technicians, engineers, base support personnel, and as we had to provide our own security, private military contractors. If you're not sure what private military contractors are, think Blackwater, mercenaries, or look them up and you'll get the picture. Our private military contractors were a mix of ex-US Special Forces, Army, Green Berets, Delta Force, Air Force Pararescue, and SEALs, British SAS, French Foreign Legion, and ex-South African Rhodesian Special Forces. All of them were now mercenaries, and in reality, so were the rest of us to some degree. Most of the private military contractors were darn good men, but when you assemble a motley crew of individuals from such disparate backgrounds, you're bound to have a couple of bad apples in the bunch. This story is about one of those bad apples, and for the purposes of this story, we'll call this bad apple Roid Rage. Roid Rage was one of the supervisory private military contractors and oversaw the night watch from 2200 to 0600 hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I usually started my day at around 0700 hours, 7 a.m., and often worked until midnight, although those last few hours were generally spent surfing the internet and catching up with folks back in the US, as Iraq is 9 hours ahead. You're in the middle of the Iraqi desert, so there's not much else to do anyways, and other than the daily 100-ton explosion at 1600 hours, 4 p.m., the internet is pretty much your primary source of entertainment. Since I was often in the office late at night, I was regularly alone in the office with Roid Rage for a couple of hours. As I previously mentioned, I managed the IT communications infrastructure for this project, and a vital component of that infrastructure were our telephones and voice over IP VoIP phone system. All of our sites used a satellite uplink to connect to a central VoIP server in Baghdad, which in turn connected us to the world. You could pick up any phone and dial a 5-digit extension to connect to any of our sites throughout Iraq, or call any international number in the world. It was a pretty sweet setup, but it was also ripe for abuse. We tried locking down international dialing with various server rules and PIN schemes, but due to the inherent latency in satellite communications and the amount of bandwidth being consumed over a single satellite uplink at each site, we had trouble keeping those rules pushed to the phones on every desk. Ultimately, we had to scrap the restrictions as they were a real headache, and we went with an honor system. All international calls for business would be logged for review by the site manager each month. Anybody wanting to make a personal international call had to use an AT&T calling card, which you could top up online or with a credit card. After spending a few nights alone in the office with Roid Rage, I noticed a trend. Roid Rage would start his shift, check in with his men at their various positions and patrols on base, and then pick up the phone and talk in hushed tones for hours. It was a fairly large building, and our desks were on opposite sides of the office, so I couldn't ever really make out what he was saying, but I could hear this constant murmur of him speaking to someone on the other end of the phone. It wasn't my business, however, so I largely ignored him. This went on for a couple of months, and as our site manager had to return to the US for a family emergency, the phone logs went unreviewed during that time period. A couple of weeks after the site manager returned, I was summoned to the conference room for a meeting with him and our senior US military and Department of Defense advisors. I could sense the tension in the room, and as I sat down, the site manager slid a manila folder across the table to me. As I opened the folder to reveal pages upon pages of call logs, he said, "Freebase, we know you're usually in the office late at night and somebody has been making hundreds of international calls during that time and racked up thousands of dollars in phone bills. I hate to say this, but you're our prime suspect at this point, and with theft of this magnitude, we're gonna have no choice but to terminate you immediately and bar you from working on any DoD contracts in the future. Unless you have some evidence to the contrary, we're going to move forward with this termination and remove you from the country on the next supply convoy." I was shocked and sat in stunned silence for a couple of seconds, and then it hit me. Those calls were made by Roid Rage. Someone hadn't been using their calling card. I immediately protested my innocence and told them that every night, Roid Rage would get on the phone at the start of his shift and would still be on the phone as I left around midnight. They then summoned Roid Rage to the conference room and confronted him with the records. He begrudgingly admitted it was him and began to spin some BS story about being unable to top up his calling card with his credit cards and blah blah blah. All the while he's staring at me with eyes of the fiercest degree of rage. Short on senior private military contractors at the time, so a call was made to Baghdad and a decision handed down that Roid Rage's employer was to immediately settle the debt with the US government, and Roid Rage's salary would be withheld until he worked off the debt with his employer. Roid Rage was also put on final warning that any future impropriety whatsoever would be met with immediate termination and removal from Iraq, as well as being blacklisted from working future DoD contracts. For an ex-US Special Forces operator turned mercenary like Roid Rage, that would forever spell the end of DoD contracting gravy train, and he didn't take this threat to his livelihood lightly. Now, any rational person would admit they messed up, tighten up their game, and move on. But Roid Rage isn't a rational person by a long shot, and the events that were about to unfold would highlight his irrational and sociopathic nature. After the daily demolition at 1600 hours, 4 p.m., I was especially dirty, so I hurried back to the base to beat the evening rush on the shower trailer so I could grab a hot shower before the limited supply of hot water ran out. Our water heaters took forever to heat. Upon entering the shower and toilet trailer, I noticed that I had the entire place to myself. I savored this rare moment of solitude, used the toilet in peace, disrobed, and stepped into a nice, much-needed hot shower. Just as I was working a nice lather of shampoo into my hair, I hear the door to the shower trailer open. Boots clomp across the floor to my shower stall, and the shower curtain is ripped off its hanger by none other than a very pissed off Roid Rage. Seething with rage, he grabbed me by the throat and yanked my wet, naked butt out of the shower and slammed me up against the opposite wall of the trailer, choking me all the while. Now, I'm about 5'11" and a toned 175 pounds, but Roid Rage stands 6 foot 4 inches tall, weighs about 240 pounds, and is a steroid-enhanced, muscle-bound mass of a man. Roid Rage's grip on my throat put ever-increasing pressure on my windpipe, and in my oxygen-deprived state, I began to panic. I thrashed about trying to loosen his grip, but in doing so, I expended the limited oxygen I had, and felt myself growing weaker by the moment. Roid Rage leaned in close to my face and said, "You think you can rat me out like a little bee and there wouldn't be consequences? Let me tell you this, Iraq is the home of unsolved mysteries, and bad crap happens to people every day out here. You'd better watch your effing back, you bee-butt mother effer, because I'm gonna be coming for you from every effing angle, at every effing opportunity, from this moment forward." Just as I felt myself about to black out, he threw me to the floor and gave me a solid kick to the stomach, followed by another to the kidneys, and walked out leaving me cold, wet, and gasping for air. I pulled myself up onto a nearby bench, caught my breath, and staggered back into the shower in shock. I pissed blood for 2 days after that beating, so much for a peaceful afternoon shower. I made my way to my quarters, sat on my bed, and thought about everything that had just taken place. My immediate thought was to report him to the powers that be, but given the circumstances and that he was always armed, I had to plan my next course of action carefully. Roid Rage is a steroid-influenced individual and professional killer with his career on the line in the high-stress environment that is Iraq. My fear slowly turned to caution and then evolved into anger. Yes, I'd have to plan my next course of action and ultimate revenge very carefully. For the time being, I decided against reporting him and riding on any convoys he was on. I had been procrastinating setting up a private Wi-Fi network connection to my trailer, but I wasn't going to be caught dead spending any late nights alone in the office with Roid Rage in the near future, so I got that set up that night. The next night, I left my trailer to use the bathroom, and as I passed the office on the way back to my room, I saw Roid Rage sitting at his desk by the window on the phone. Why is this guy on the phone all the time, and who is he talking to? Time to investigate. Investigation. I don't want to get off in the weeds and technical jargon, so I'll try to keep this brief and simple as possible so you can comprehend my next course of action. All of our phones at our site were voice over IP phones and connected to the local network, which was connected to our satellite uplink. Every VoIP phone has a unique MAC address, a fingerprint if you will, which identifies it on the network. I had the master list of all devices and phones connected to the network, so I could easily identify the phone Roid Rage used every night. Network Instruments makes a nice little program called Observer, which allows you to monitor all traffic on the network. It even has a cool little feature where you can flag a phone's MAC address, fingerprint, and tell it to automatically begin capturing traffic on that phone from the moment the phone makes a call until the end of the call. Once the call is complete, it dumps the entire phone call to an audio file, which you can then play back at your leisure. Pretty neat, time to observe. Analysis. Over the next month, I amassed hours and hours of calls that Roid Rage made, and I finally found out who he was talking to. We already know that Roid Rage is a huge piece of crap, but the conversations I listened to took it to a whole other level of douchebaggery. I sat at my desk every day with my headphones in, pretending to be listening to music, but in reality, I was digesting each and every call, taking notes, and marking timestamps of the good stuff. Here's what I found. Roid Rage is married and has 3 kids. Roid Rage also has a mistress in the US who is a stripper, and by the sounds of it, she's a world-class gold digger. Roid Rage spoke to his wife and kids about twice a week on average, but always kept the conversations brief because he was busy running the show in a very dangerous Iraq. As soon as Roid Rage would hang up with his family, he'd immediately call his stripper mistress. Let's call her SM. Roid Rage made it a point to call and talk to stripper mistress for hours every night, however. A douchebag has to have priorities, right? Most of the conversations were pretty nasty phone sex, but others were sprinkled with bits of gold like, "Yeah, of course I effing hate my wife. She's a dumb bee and I regret marrying her in the first place. The reason my kids are so effing stupid is because of her crap genes. Yes, baby. I promise as soon as I get home, I'm gonna divorce her and marry you. Promise." Another memorable conversation involved Roid Rage calling his wife and telling her that he'd have to cut his next vacation leave to the US short because he was so critical to the operations in Iraq, they wouldn't be able to run the place without him. This conversation was followed with an immediate call to stripper mistress telling her, "Yeah, the old lady bought the story hook, line, and sinker. Yeah, I told you, she's a dumb bee. Yeah, baby, I'll book the tickets and this time we're going to Paris. We're gonna do it big." While these conversations were certainly deplorable, other conversations with stripper mistress were more dangerous in nature and severe violations of operational security. Given Roid Rage's foul nature, I can kinda understand why he felt it necessary to brag about operations. But man, you're talking to a stripper in the US who has no idea about any of this Iraq crap anyways. Make crap up if you must, but don't actually discuss the specifics of our operations and movements to inflate your pathetic ego. Some of these calls went like this. Yeah, I'm the convoy commander tomorrow. Yep, large and in charge. I'm running a 20-vehicle convoy of flatbed trucks loaded with big Scud missiles from Kerbala to Amara tomorrow morning at 0900 hours, and all 40 of the guys on the convoy report to me. These missiles are pretty volatile and sensitive, and we'd be a prime target for the bad guys, so I came up with a plan to cover everything with these huge canvas tents we stole off some racial slur, racial stereotype, effers, so we can disguise everything. Hell yeah, I'm smart, baby. This is just one of the many calls of this nature, and the growing frequency of these calls ultimately forced me to cut my investigation short and move to the next phase of my plan. Phase 1 Action. I started studying Roid Rage's movements and which convoys he was on and where they were going. If I was going to pull this off, I had to be pretty spot on with my timing. I edited all the calls down to the good stuff and burned 2 CDs for 2 different audiences. Roid Rage ran a weekly supply convoy to Baghdad, and one of these CDs needed to be shipped to the US within a week's time. The only way to make that happen was to drop off one of them to DHL at Baghdad International Airport. They always stop by there on their way back to our site to pick up beer and booze at the duty-free, which was the only thing open in the airport terminal at that time. So I packaged one CD up and asked a buddy on the convoy to drop it off at DHL for me, and told him I'd pay him back when he returned. Once the convoy returned to our base, my buddy handed me the receipt and tracking information. Done. Phase 1 is complete. Now it's time for Phase 2. Phase 2 Action. The following week, I packaged the other CD up and asked the same buddy on the supply convoy to drop that off to the DoD Country Director's office at the project headquarters. By this time, the first CD was out for delivery in the US, and the second CD would be delivered to Baghdad HQ in 4 hours. Perfect. Not to pat myself on the back, but the disaster that was about to unfold for Roid Rage was the product of patience, dedication, meticulous planning, and flawless execution. The convoy made its way to Baghdad, and the second CD was delivered to headquarters. Roid Rage made the usual pass by the airport for the booze run, and then returned later that night. Reaction. The following morning, the entire base awoke to an unusual sound. That unmistakable sound of the whirring of helicopter blades. The only time we'd ever had a chopper land was for a medevac, medical evacuation, which was for one of our local Iraqi ammo handlers who thought an empty weapons bunker would be a good place to do adult stuff on his lunch break. That didn't go over so well, and he ended up getting bitten by a viper in his growing area. That's another story for another time though. So this Black Hawk helicopter with overhead Apache escorts lands, and these guys come running out asking for Roid Rage and the head of the PMC at our base. They unceremoniously roused Roid Rage out of bed along with the head of security and told them they needed to leave immediately for Baghdad. With just the clothes on their back and their body armor, they were whisked away within minutes. As soon as they left, the camp manager approached me and said we needed to have a chat with Baghdad in the conference room. We made our way to the conference room and got on a call with our local DoD advisors and the DoD country director in Baghdad. He had listened to the CD and wanted to commend me for blowing the whistle on Roid Rage. He also scolded me a bit for not blowing the whistle sooner on the first violation of operational security I had heard. But when I told him the entire story and the brutal insult I endured at the hands of Roid Rage in the bathroom, he softened his tone a bit. He concluded the call with assurances that Roid Rage would be dealt with swiftly and thanked me for my vigilance. Fallout. What follows was relayed to me by the head of security, who traveled with Roid Rage on the helicopter to Baghdad. Upon arrival at the helipad at headquarters, a US Army security detail led the 2 individuals into the DoD country director's office, and Roid Rage was confronted with the evidence. The director sat there with the senior advisors present and played the entire CD in front of Roid Rage and his superior. It was a heated, one-sided conversation, and Roid Rage got ripped up one side and down the other. He was ordered to leave the country immediately and would be taken under escort to the US Air Force PAX terminal at Baghdad International Airport upon conclusion of the meeting. He was also notified that he would no longer be eligible to work DoD contracts in the future. The head of the PMC was also excoriated for allowing this behavior to happen on his watch and notified that their security company would now be under investigation for any other possible violations. If the investigation unearthed additional violations, they'd be found in breach of contract, which would be terminated upon transition to a new PMC company. That company lasted another 7 months in Iraq. As Roid Rage left the meeting under escort, the director turned to him and said, "And tell your effing wife to stop calling here and blowing up the phones. She's pissed off about something, but that's your effing problem to deal with. You need to call her when you get to the airport and tell her to knock that crap off." Moral of the story, don't F with your IT guy. You gotta think about this guy back in the US now, not able to do any more DoD contracts. He's either in some very remote country right now, doing some private security work, or he's the bouncer at a booby bar who still thinks he's a lot more important than he really is. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Asmodeus. Thieving manager tries to frame me for their theft. It doesn't go well for them. Let's jump right in. I'm a long-time peruser of this subreddit, but have never posted this story because every time I think to, I am busy or on my mobile. It's a longish story, so I always put it off, but I have the time now. This story happened around 6 years ago when I worked for a retail company I will call No-Op. Jay was well known to be a thief by the base staff and some of the lower levels of management. Unfortunately, she was a golden girl to Mo and Travis, and we never had any solid proof. We also didn't get pay docked, etc. unless it was over a certain amount, which it never was. So staff never had a real incentive to try and find proof. One of Jay's favorite things to steal were vouchers for money off products or shopping because you were just supposed to rip them up and put them in the safe. There was no official way of counting these to return them to the company, so she could use them again in a different store and get away with it. This particular day was Halloween, and I was on till 4, the only till with no cameras on it. Mo came up and paid for her shopping with some gift vouchers she had received at a store manager's meeting because the store was doing really well. I served her and no one else touched my till all day because I was the main person on the tills for this shift. We closed up for the night and Jay took the registers to be cashed up. I went out to the pub with friends and had a good night, not knowing what was coming. The next shift I'm on, Mo calls me into the office and tells me that the vouchers she used were not in the safe and she knew that it was my till. She wanted me to return the vouchers and would not press charges or put anything on my file if I just returned them immediately. I, of course, did not have them and testified as such, but she didn't believe me. I went looking everywhere, the bin under the till 4 and the bins outside, under the tills and on the floors around the tills, just in case I had dropped them or put them somewhere dumb while trying to sort out cash, etc. Roughly an hour later, Jay comes in, hears what's going on, and offers to look as well. She finds them in 30 seconds flat, somewhere I had already looked. I essentially hissed out, what a coincidence that as soon as Jay looks there, she finds it immediately. How coincidental! Seething with white fury as I knew she was now framing me for her own theft. She could have found them in the office and made it a simple mistake, but no, she made me the fall guy for her own idiocy. I tried to plead my case to Mo and Travis, stating that I wouldn't be dumb enough to steal vouchers that I knew were Mo's because I was the one who served her. One of the other team leaders, Paul, knew fine and well that it was Jay and tried to tell Mo and Travis that I was being set up. But she was the golden girl and could do no wrong, while my name was mud as far as they were concerned. Heck, they thought Jay had caught me in the act. This meant war. Over the next few months, I got really friendly with Jay, flirting outrageously with her and basically pretending like I really respected her and that we were good buddies. It took me a while to work my way into her trust, but once I was there, I knew I could catch her stealing and prove it. We wasted off a load of Christmas chocolate products that hadn't been sold, and I put them in a bag to be put in the bin. Jay said we should take them home, against company policy and seen as stealing, because they were just going to waste otherwise. We were stood underneath a camera, just outside of its range, so I said, I don't want any, but if you want them, you can have them. and put them on a trolley just inside of the camera's range. I had studied the camera angles in great detail, preparing for a moment exactly like this. I saw her look at the camera, look down at the trolley and back to the camera before walking off to get her stuff. I warned my colleagues not to take any of the chocolate, even if offered, and had an evil grin on my face, which my colleagues commented on. When Jay came down, she nonchalantly picked up the bag as if it was her shopping, offered chocolate to everyone, and walked out the door with it. Gotcha, B. The next morning I arrived for my shift and put on the most somber face possible as I approached Travis. You should check the cameras on the back door at approximately 10:21. I think you'll find what you see is very interesting. He asked me to explain further, and I looked over towards where Jay was, not even 5 meters away, and looked back. I can't go into further detail right now, but I would strongly suggest you go and look at the cameras for that time now. Travis begrudgingly walked off to do just that, and within 10 minutes, Jay was called into the office and her bag was searched. Within the hour, she was suspended pending investigation, and within the week, she was fired and barred from the store. I got a full apology from the managers who didn't believe me, who explained they genuinely believed it was me and had no idea Jay could have possibly been a thief. Their jaws hit the floor after I explained that every member of staff knew she was the thief, but that we didn't feel like we could do anything about it. After going around asking people if this was true, I got another apology. 6 months later, I was offered training to become a team leader myself. I took it, but ended up quitting for a white-collar role in a different company before I finished my training. So I have a bit of a background in retail myself, and I know there might be some questions coming up about if something is destined for the waste bin, then why can't you just take it? Well, the problem you run into there is that things just start happening to get damaged, and oh my gosh, we have to throw them out, oh I'll just take them home. So that's where that policy comes from, and the reason why, if something gets damaged or expired, it has to go in the garbage and can't just be taken home. Did you know we started back up the Karma Comment Chameleon podcast? It's now available on all major podcasting platforms. Just search out Karma Comment Chameleon. Our next story today comes to us from Chit Anya. Refuse to teach all males in the class? We'll see what the Department of Education has to say about it. Let's jump right in. I'd like to preface this lengthy story by saying that this is in no way an anti-feminism story, an MRA tale, or anything of the sort. I'm a proud feminist who was just trying to graduate from my crappy high school and was having extreme difficulties with a particular teacher and an uncaring principal and faculty. Back in 2008, I was in year 11, Australian, second last year of high school. My high school had a reputation for being abysmal, and faculty would more often than not brush aside any problems students were facing. Enter the crazy teacher, from now on referred to as CT. Crazy teacher taught a multimedia class I enrolled in, and this was the first year they had done this class as it was a TAFE equivalency course they were trialing, sort of like a community college course you could take during high school, earning a certificate at the end. These courses are not graded, but pass or fail. Crazy teacher started off fine for a few weeks, then the rants started. They would last the full hour of the class as she yelled and yelled about almost anything. Our perceived laziness, our idiocy, the powerlessness of the principal to do anything. This, obviously, severely impacted our work as we couldn't focus while crazy teacher was screaming at the top of her lungs. Several students voiced concerns to deputies, the principal, student services, etc., all to no avail. One day, crazy teacher announced that because the male students were taking up all her time with questions, she would no longer be teaching us, instead only focusing on the female students. This was an elective course, and there were 2/3 male students to a 1/3 female students in the class. At first, I thought crazy teacher was joking, but it became abundantly clear that they were seriously not going to teach 2/3 of the class, while ranting and raving every time we had them. Eventually, I had had enough. I recorded one of her hour-long rants in its entirety on my old Nokia slide phone. I vividly remember that in it, crazy teacher said that the principal has no power in this classroom. God himself could come down from heaven and he wouldn't be able to stop me. Bingo. The next day, I took this to the principal and demanded a meeting with them and the vice deputy. I showed them the recording, albeit a mere snippet of the 60 minutes. After a moment, the principal asked if I knew that I could be suspended for using my phone in class and recording someone without their permission. I was told to delete the recording on my phone immediately or face disciplinary action. I deleted the recording as asked, and the principal and deputy thought that would be the end of it, but oh boy, were they wrong. While I'd never been one to stick up for myself, I decided it was now or never. I told the principal that I was disgusted by the audacity they displayed to threaten me with disciplinary action over showing them proof that there was a problem with Crazy Teacher. I told them truthfully that I had made copies of the recording and would release them to every major news and radio station unless something was done about this situation. They didn't believe me and again threatened me with suspension. At that moment, I realized what I had to do, so I pretended to drop it and claimed that I would continue my classes without complaint. That night, I wrote a very detailed letter to the Department of Education wherein I recounted as much as I could remember about Crazy Teacher and their ridiculous rants. I explained the lengths I had gone to have this resolved within the school and the response I was met with. I put the copy of the recording onto a thumb drive with the letter and sent it to the Department of Education. Weeks went by without a response, and with everything I was dealing with at school, I had almost forgotten about it. Crazy Teacher would not show up for some classes. Sometimes Crazy Teacher would kick us out for no reason and then scream at us for leaving. It was a nightmare. 3 weeks later, I received a response from the Department of Education. In the letter, they apologized for the mistreatment I had suffered at the hands of teacher and principal alike, and explained that they would be conducting an audit of the entire school. Literally every single staff member there would be audited with no stone left unturned. They thanked me for bringing this to their attention and assured me that no disciplinary action would be taken against me for recording the rant that I had supplied them with. Soon, the entire school found out what I had done. Most of the teachers absolutely loathed me after that point, one going so far as to say that, "You should have kept your mouth shut and your head down." I guess the audit was seen as an inconvenience to them, but what is a small inconvenience against the education and possibly graduation of around 15 kids? We just wanted to learn and were discriminated against for no reason, with no help offered from within the school. Even some of the students in that class with me thought I'd gone too far, but I couldn't care less about their opinions. I knew what I did was right. Eventually, Crazy Teacher left on her own accord, literally stomping out of class and driving away mid-lesson, never to be seen again. I heard she got a really nice job at a private school not far away, so I guess she got lucky. I graduated the next year, with the principal remarking as she handed over my certificate during the graduation ceremony, "I can't believe you made it." Not in an encouraging good for you way, mind you, but in a "I tried so hard to stop this from happening" kind of way. This was 10 years ago, and it still boils my blood thinking about it, but I learned a valuable lesson. If you can't fight the system, make the system work in your favor. I hope this encourages any students who are facing similar issues to speak up and demand that they receive the education they deserve. The same thing works for both schools and in the business environment. If you're having a problem with your teacher or your manager, you go up a level and mention it to them. If they don't get anywhere with it, then you go above their head as well, and you keep on doing this until you get the ears of somebody important. One thing you have to hope for, though, is that all of those levels aren't so corrupt that they'll protect that original teacher, because I'm sure that happens. Our next story today comes to us from YT Sharkyevno. "I parked my friend's car in the sun. I learned to regret it." Let's jump right in. So I posted this in Petty Revenge, but it was apparently too extreme to be there. What my friend does goes way above and beyond the original offense, so it's ProRevenge, done in a really petty way, follows all rules. So now on to the story. I live in the desert part of the US, and during a few months in the summer, it is consistently over 110 degrees, 43.3 for my European bros. I was borrowing my friend's car for a quick drive, cause mine was at the shop. He asked me to park it in the shade, but I could not find a shady spot, so I couldn't. So when he went to use his car, it was burning hot inside. He went to me and asked why I did not park it in the shade, and I told him I could not find any. He told me I would regret it, and I thought he was joking. He then offered to pick up my car from the shop. I said yes because I thought he was just going to park it in the sun for a one-time revenge. So I drive a Prius, and it uses automatic keys that open it when you go near it. This will be important later. He parks my car in the sun like I expected and gives back my keys. I expect this to be the end, but no. The next day I went to work and parked in my normal spot in the shade, one of the only shady spots there. After that, I walked into work and proceeded as normal. Later, I went to find my car during lunch only to see it 3 spots over in the sun. I thought that was weird because I remember parking in my normal spot, but maybe I'm just tired and someone was already there in the spot and I'm having a memory lapse. My car being in the sun was burning hot. This continues to happen for like 10 more days until I finally convince myself I'm not crazy. I start thinking, who the F is moving my car? No one has a key but me. Then I remember my friend and what he said. He had to be the one doing this. I talked to him and he smiles. Apparently, when he went to pick up my car, he got a new automatic key made for $300 and has been moving my car 2 or 3 spots over every day into the sun. Well, let's just say it did not stop after that, but instead, he did it more. From my apartment to work, he made it his life's duty that summer to make my driving miserable. Also, if you're reading this, name redacted, you know who you are, F you, Peckerhead. Additional info for anyone who thinks it's fake, cause he could not get the keys copied that easily. I had my title and registration in the car. I don't do that anymore because people have made me aware about how dumb that is. I would never take it out, cause I would lose it. He also had my driver's license, so the shop would let him pick up the car. I asked him, and he said the people who made the key just asked for the registration and title and never even asked for the driver's license, even though he had it. Also, he has stopped and given me back the key because it's winter now. This story is a few months old. He said that one summer was enough pain for my sin. So I don't know if anybody else is wondering here, but what was in his car that made him so angry about it being parked in the sun for one day? It seems to me like the revenge of constantly moving the friend's car was complete overkill. So here's the part where we get to speculate. Comment down below, what do you think was in the friend's car that he really didn't want it parked in the sun for? Our next story today comes to us from Straight Trade 488. Short my boyfriend $200? Enjoy your divorce. Let's jump right in. Hope y'all get a kick out of this. It's a super long one. A lot of people know I read it, so some details have been changed, but overall the story is as accurate as can be. So this whole debacle started in my freshman year of college. I went to a religious college, so there were a lot of really strict rules regarding curfew and punishments for not going to the mandatory worships. This comes into play later. Background on me, I am not a physically imposing young lady. Just under 5 feet and 100 pounds soaking wet and wearing cinderblock shoes. At this time, I had been recently dumped, and so I was starting college practically alone, as my ex and I were set to go to the same university, but he dropped out to join military school. Before we start, let's denote some names. Me is me, of course. Andy is my dear boyfriend, now fiance. Jess, one of my best friends and roommate after the first quarter. And finally, the antagonist of the tale, Sam. Not real names, of course, and at the start of this, we were all 18, we are all 24 to 25 now. As this was a religious school, we had a sort of camp out in the week or two before classes started. It was meant to be a getting to know you kind of thing, and so we had things called family groups. I was a little freaked out, but in the group, there was one loud, overly friendly girl named Sam. Sam was the same ethnicity as me, and so we quickly bonded over a shared ethnic background and how similar we were. She had a boyfriend in the army, and I lamented my single status and how my ex basically ditched me for the Navy. She seemed perfect, sympathetic, social, and fun. I warmed up to our family group with the help of my new best friend. We had a great weekend and got to know others in the group, including Jess. Jess was more quiet and disinterested, with a classic case of resting bee face, but eventually she warmed up to me and I to her. Sam didn't really like them, but you wouldn't know it unless she told you. The first sign of something off with her was during dinner. I was sitting with Jess and her friend from high school, Andy. He and I really hit it off, but as my heart was still freshly broken, I kept some boundaries up, but agreed to go watch a movie when we got back from the trip. Immediately, Sam pulled up a chair and was all over him, asking about his past, how he and Jess met, what he thought about her outfit, and on and on. I was a little miffed, but just ate my burrito. For the rest of the trip, Andy and I were hardly apart, and Sam got more and more passive-aggressive with me. bringing up my ex and how I was moving on too quickly. I believed her and canceled my date with Andy and said that I didn't want him to just be a rebound. He was understanding and chill with just being friends, which was a blessing for me, but seemingly not good enough for Sam. After the trip was over, I decided to show them around the city since I was a local student. While the others put their stuff in their rooms, Sam asked me to stay behind because she had to confess something to me. She started spewing some BS about how Andy had cornered her outside the cabin and was being a perv and telling her how beautiful she was, so on and so forth. I was skeptical and made it known, but her response was just looking out for you, girly. By then, the others came back and I just decided to ignore what she said and have a good time in the city. This was incident number 1. A couple weeks go by, Andy, Jess, and I become a little squad of sorts because all our schedules matched up, whereas finding time to hang out with Sam was more than difficult. This all came to a head when Jess and Andy planned a little trip to the local Benihana place and didn't invite Sam. She found out via social media and flew off the handle. I had gone home for the weekend, and when I came back on Monday, I was greeted with drama, tears, and accusations. The gist of the situation is, the group didn't invite Sam because she is a vegetarian and has a lot of allergies, so it would be dangerous to even step foot in the Benihana. And in retaliation, Sam took her best friends, aka random girls from the dorm, horseback riding and posted a photo with the caption, "Better than Benihana." Incident 2. Once again, this is what I came back to, and so things were pretty frosty. I asked for some backstory, and apparently, it was work friends who invited Andy and Jess, so it wasn't even their place to invite someone else. And it wasn't like she would be able to eat anything at the Benihana anyways, so they literally didn't even think they were being rude. According to Sam, they were purposefully excluding her, and that no one likes her, and that this was just like it was in high school. She didn't have very many friends, and we were just becoming privy to why exactly that was. Incident number 3 was the friendship bracelets. She ordered these semi-expensive bracelets for me and Jess, but mysteriously Jess is broke in the mail, and the replacement would totally come any day now. Jess pretended not to be hurt, but it obviously stung when she would fawn over our bracelets and how we are such good friends. Spoiler, the bracelet never came. Now, I was still trying to smooth things over, but it kept getting worse and worse. If I was hanging out with Andy or Jess, she wouldn't speak to me, but would only talk crap when we were alone. During all of this, Andy and I kept getting closer and eventually started dating, but low-key, cause the whole situation with Sam, and we didn't want to set her off. I know we were spineless back then. Now for the catalyst for the revenge. She was a wannabe YouTuber and wanted to do a holiday video. Andy is a film major, but he doesn't want anything to do with her after all her lies and petty behavior. But then she made an offer we couldn't refuse. "I'll give you $200 and pay for food." And for what should have been an hour or two of filming, we were sold. I was set to manage the site since my personality is get it done, and he was in charge of filming. He worked so hard on it, y'all. He storyboarded, he made a script for her, he got all his equipment together. I was so proud of him. I contacted the diner where we were filming and got everything together, and we were set. Filming day arrives and we get our hair and makeup done for the actors and actresses, and we all get to the diner an hour before, at her assistance, and set up. She says she'll be 30 minutes late, and so we decide to eat after shooting some B-roll. Guess how long it took her and her entourage to arrive? 2 whole hours. We finally get filming, and if you are counting, we have been at the diner for 4 hours pre-filming. We spend another 2 hours filming, and we have to take pics in our outfits and everything. Did she pay for our food? Nope. And she tells Andy, "You got a big payday coming. You deserve more than $200 for today." He's happy because he wanted to take me out for a nice date for the holiday, but spoiler again, she didn't pay up. So a week or 2 goes by and it gets closer and closer to holiday, and we already turned over all the footage. We are just waiting for payment. Then came the excuses. "I don't trust Zelle. I'm waiting for my auntie to pay me. My aunt's in the Caribbean right now, and she doesn't trust Zelle either." We kept hounding her for the money, and the holidays came and went. She posted the video and stopped answering texts. Since we all lived together, I confronted her, and more excuses, then she said to give her 2 more weeks. During those 2 weeks, she told everyone who would listen that she already paid us, and that we were terrible people to try and extort her for more. Now at this point in the year, we are fed up with her, and Andy is ready to write the $200 off. He complains to his smoking buddies, and the smoking buddies get our side of the story out to the relatively small school, and pretty soon, she doesn't have a leg to stand on. She gets nasty, texting me all this BS about how Andy is cheating on me, and that I deserve better, and screenshots of their conversations where he supposedly tells her how he'd rather not be committed. Now, we had some commitment issues in the beginning on both sides, but she tried to present these texts as recent, not stuff from months ago. The final straw was when she called me stupid and naive for staying in the relationship despite him being a greedy man whore. Now I was going scorched earth. For some background on Sam, she was a chronic cheater, like get drunk at a party and give a guy a BJ cheater, then go out the next weekend and do it again. She was also married. She and her husband got married right out of high school, which is typical of army guys in my experience. The ink wasn't even dry on the marriage certificate less than a year when she burned us. But I was someone she chose to confide in since she thought I was too stupid to see through her after all the crap she put us through. So I gathered evidence. All the cheating, the videos of her doing crap at parties, sex with various guys, the drinking binges, and her crap talking her loving army boyfriend. I gathered all of this information for more than a year. I felt horrible for the guy, but I needed a file that would darn her to legal hell. D-Day arrived when about a year and a half after I met her, she told me that she thought her husband was cheating, as when he was deployed, she found a video on his phone of him and his buddy dancing on some girls in a club. Sam was livid. She was cursing and swearing she would take him for every cent in court for cheating on her. Never mind that she was giving BJs for fun every other weekend. I asked her if she had proof, and she said that proof doesn't matter, they always believe the hurt wife. I compiled all my evidence and wrote a very long apology letter for waiting this long and sent it anonymously. Sam didn't return to school the next year, and I kinda lost track of her. I got reminded when my fiance showed me that terrible video we did for her. I confessed what I did, and we social media stalked her accounts. She now posts a lot of single and loving it memes, and she has a few vlogs talking about fake friends and how simple living is the best. I guess that's a consequence of losing her luxurious, rich girl lifestyle that her husband's family provided for her. Looking at her ex-husband's page, he has a beautiful wife and a baby on the way, looking happier than I'd ever seen him. Now, down in the comments for this one, there was a comment that said, "Why are people like this allowed to carry on behaving like this?" And the response to it says, "Because no one has bee-slapped the ever-loving Christ out of them yet." Yep, that makes sense. Another lesson learned from this is if you do a paid task for somebody else, get some of that money up front, or at least get a contract that states they can't use the material until you get paid. Our next story today comes to us from Dragon Dad IX. Father endangers his kid to tell me off, ends up calling the police for himself. Let's jump right in. Hello Reddit, this is my very first post here after watching Reddit videos on YouTube for so long. I'm not sure if this story belongs here or Petty Revenge, but here it goes. A few weeks ago, I was driving in my neighborhood playing Pokemon Go, not while driving obviously. The end of my neighborhood has a Pokestop that I collect items from every day, as you get bonus items if you collect from stops every day. This particular day was my 7th day, meaning I would get even more items and would start over from day 1 the next day. I drove to the stop, got the items, set my phone on my passenger seat, and went home. The road I was driving on was 20 miles per hour, but I was going about 12 to 13 miles per hour. I drive up a small hill and turn a corner when a wild family appears, including the butthole dad. The wife, her friend, and the 3 kids walking by them stepped off to the side of the road to let me pass. But as I was going by, Butthole Dad, who had a young boy about 3 to 4 years old in one arm and holding a Budweiser bottle in the other, important later, actually stepped closer to my car and yelled something at me. Being as I had gotten into an accident recently and was trying to be as safe as possible, I stopped the car, rolled down my window, and asked if he was alright. The conversation went as follows. "Are you guys alright? Why did you do that? You see my family, right? Yes, what about them? You know you were driving too fast for this neighborhood, right? I should point out that I live in Illinois, and while my car was being repaired from the accident, I had a loaner car with Wisconsin plates. Sir, I was only going about 12 miles per hour, and the limit is 20 here. I wasn't driving too fast. Well, you almost hit me and my son. Yeah, 'cause you stepped close to a moving vehicle. The only one putting you guys in danger was yourself. Butthole looks at my phone in the passenger seat. I don't know the laws in Wisconsin, but here in Illinois, you can't be on your phone while driving. I'm calling the police. I don't know their laws either. This car is just a loaner. I live here in Illinois. Then you should know the laws. I'm calling the cops. Have fun with that. And with that, I just left. I know I probably should have stayed, but since I didn't actually do anything wrong, I wasn't taking his threat seriously. I went home and made some ramen to eat. As I was sitting in my dining room, I look out the window and nearly choke on my noodles. Butthole followed me home. He was on his cell phone with the dispatcher, and I thought I was screwed. About 5 minutes later, 2 cop cars with 3 police officers who didn't really talk throughout the whole thing. I stepped out thinking I was done for. The officers started to question the 2 of us. Do you know why we're here? I have a pretty good idea what you think you're doing here, but why don't you let me know? This gentleman called us saying you attempted to run his family over after you got caught texting while driving and going way over the speed limit. My mind went blank for a few seconds. This prick actually said that I had attempted vehicular manslaughter. My mind started working again and I said, "Sir, that couldn't be farther from the truth. I was driving home from playing Pokemon Go on my phone when this man stepped close to my car while I was driving. My phone was on the passenger seat the entire ride home. He's lying. He nearly killed my family. Arrest him now." Sir, calm down. We'll settle this. OP, what was this man doing when the incident occurred? Suddenly, an idea popped into my head, and right there, on the fly, the revenge started. He was walking with his family along the side of the road, carrying a young boy on one arm and holding a beer bottle in the other. That's not true, you piece of garbage. Sir, control yourself. As I drove by them, the rest of his family went to the side of the road, but he actually stepped closer to my car. I think he got within an inch of me. This is BS. He's just trying to protect himself. Sir, if what he's saying is true, you could actually be arrested here, not him. Are you sure that's what happened? Positive. He got way too close to my moving vehicle, holding a child and a bottle of Miller Lite. It wasn't Miller Lite, it was Budweiser. He cut himself off and tried to backtrack, but it was too late. All the officers looked at him. He tried to defend himself, but then Officer 3 said something I thought I would never hear a cop say in my life. Sir, have you had anything to drink this evening? Butthole Dad, now very less confident. No. They moved him to one of the cop cars and gave him a breathalyzer test. 0.12, just over the limit. Gotcha, butthole. Butthole Dad ended up confessing to them that I was right and was arrested for public intoxication and child endangerment. He has to go before a judge to determine if he's a danger to his family. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges, but I told them no, since he already had enough on his plate to deal with. If I ever hear any updates about the guy, I'll let you all know. Now, OP added an edit onto the end. Unfortunately, it's not an update, but it does have a little bit more information. It says, Number 1, I'm about to appear in court to dispute the traffic ticket I received from my accident I mentioned in this story. It'll be the 3rd time in a year I appear in a courtroom, and I really didn't want to go back if I didn't have to, which is a big reason why I didn't press charges. I might have to go and be a witness if his case progresses enough though. Number 2, my neighborhood is a very small private neighborhood. It used to be all summer houses long before I was born. You could go for a walk for about 90 minutes and walk everywhere in my neighborhood. From my house to where the incident occurred was a 2 to 3 minute walk. So the guy most likely followed me as soon as I drove away, and I didn't notice because I just wanted to get away from him. That admission was epic. It wasn't Miller Lite, it was a Budweiser. Nice. That's the kind of guy that'll ask the judge to throw out his admission because he was clearly too drunk to know what he was doing. Although, maybe being hauled off to jail isn't all that bad. You don't want people thinking that you were walking around drinking a Miller Lite. Our next story today comes to us from Forest Cabin 123K. Like to scam, verbally attack women? I will make you regret the day you were born. Let's jump right in. This was about 9 years ago. I, female 48, have an extremely beautiful niece Emma, female 35, on my husband's side. She is a head-turner, very approachable, humble, and very smart. She is also very shy and has trouble asserting herself and enforcing boundaries. I used to know a guy, Dean, now 51, from my first marketing job. We worked in the same building. Most youngsters knew each other and grouped for lunch at the lobby cafe. He was a very cool guy, super funny, amenable, and likable. He was clear in his goal of becoming a business owner. Our small group kind of disbanded. I moved on and slowly lost touch with my clique. Fast forward, and now I'm married and actively looking to expand our business. I bumped into Dean at a dentist appointment. We exchanged updates while in the waiting room. He now owned a small business services company. I looked into his website and decided to give his services a try. He became our regular supplier, and our working relationship brought him lots of referrals. Basically, we indirectly helped him build his business. I had my niece Emma apply for a job at his company as he was actively looking for new workers. She was hired as a little bit of everything employee. The pay wasn't great, but she was only one course short of graduating and wanted to build her resume. For about a year, our work routine involved paying him good steady money for extremely professionally done services, payroll, accounting, expo representation, etc. Dean introduced us to Charlie. He'd been complaining that his business was getting slower and slower. 2011, the recent recession was hard to climb out of for so many small business owners. Charlie was some sort of a consultant. I use the term some sort because his actual scope wasn't clear. Charlie seemed like an okay guy, very formal and polite, with just the right balance between seriousness and smiles. We were invited to a business meeting so that Dean could discuss some stuff and hear our input. This wasn't rare. Dean and I had been avid brainstormers partners, and our sessions helped each other back when we first met. We had periodical discussions after we reconnected. I wouldn't discuss my business with him for ethical reasons, but didn't mind hearing him out and perhaps offering my opinion. Charlie and Dean presented a business opportunity, but my husband and I passed. At the end of dinner, everyone pitched in, but the tab was $90 short. Charlie apologized for not having money on him and directly asked my husband to cover him. We covered his portion because we felt we were put on the spot. I made up my mind that if the guy didn't pay us back, I would have Dean reimburse the expense. My husband and I left the restaurant and discussed the dinner surprise. We decided to drop it to avoid getting paranoid. We didn't really know this guy, and Dean didn't seem bothered at all. Charlie paid us immediately, like at 10 o'clock the next morning. He was contrite and apologetic. Charlie became a fixture at Dean's office. Dean had a change in behavior. He seemed hungry and thirsty for fast money schemes and quick success. They spent the day on meetings about most every MLM in the book. With Dean constantly out of his office, the quality of services dropped significantly. We had to chase him to deliver things on time. We needed to stress the importance of timelines, etc. Dean's office became some sort of a meeting plate for the corner cutters, the alpha male wannabes, and the I'm gonna succeed fast and rub it in the face of each person who has called me incompetent, hungry. Our frequent dinner meetings thinned out. Charlie's true character began to surface. Sexist jokes, women are stupid, blah blah, ethnic jokes, talking down at people, raising his voice. He took a sip off of my niece's Coke and she was disgusted, so she gave it to him and got a new one. My niece became Dean's formal assistant, so she had to attend every meeting, sometimes until very late hours. I began to wonder if she was getting paid for the extra hours, but I could be wrong and did not want to interfere. We declined every invitation if we knew Charlie would be there. We signed up for only 3 yearly services and canceled on other services where customer service had declined. It worked out. We then paid Dean $10,000 for installing our new platform with control over our own use of technology. 3 weeks and we still couldn't use the platform. It didn't support multiple users as needed, and we required someone from Dean's company to visit on a daily basis because we couldn't get it running. We simply asked for our money back. Dean agreed and paid us $2,000 and promised the other $8,000 in installments. I asked for a personal meeting because I needed the whole thing solved. We had paid our money, had no service, and still had to wait to get my full refund? Really? By then, Charlie had taken full control and was running the show. Crucial employees randomly got fired. Charlie yelled at everyone and made decisions, with Dean never saying a word. My niece looked unhappy. Dean had her carry his suitcase and had her constantly serve Charlie some coffee. I did not appreciate the crude jokes he directed at her either. Dean did nothing, but I stood up for her. Charlie didn't like being challenged, so the atmosphere got really tense. Too many things didn't add up. Charlie painted himself quite the 007 type. He was a former college professor, former business owner, and former marketing director. He spent months away from home and dramatically described one fateful New Year's Eve he spent alone on a plane because he was extremely necessary for the company, so he became a workaholic as the final straw that caused the end of his marriage. He was a fast talker, good with numbers, and knowledgeable. He claimed long motorcycle rides in exotic places such as Italy, yet he had no car, was living at a friend's house, and showed limited proficiency. I pressed for my money and Charlie went ballistic. He tried to put me in a corner and tried to intimidate me. He asked, "Are you a software expert? Are you? Because if you were, you wouldn't need our services. Answer my question or shut up and stop talking because you don't know what you're doing." I answered I wasn't an expert. He replied, "Then close your effing mouth." I got up and told him I'm no expert, but I'm the paying client. I warned him to watch his mouth and that he would not get a second warning. My relationship with Dean was strained. He did not stand up for me, not as a friend, but as a client. I told Dean I would never again deal with Charlie on no uncertain terms. I canceled all accounting and payroll services immediately. Zero trust. I researched Charlie's background. None of his corporate experience checked out. He had an extensive criminal record. Gender violence, bank and wire fraud, securities fraud, patrimonial crimes, and a pending arrest warrant dated 8 years prior. I forwarded this to Dean. He never replied. I urged my niece to leave her job, but she decided to end her semester and then get another job. Bad decision. She said Dean owed her overtime, and leaving her job would almost guarantee she would never see that money. Dean contacted me with a solution. He gave me an unconvincing apology and asked me to meet him and an excellent software company owner who could help. I insisted on getting my refund, but he promised he would cover the expense. I addressed Charlie's criminal records, and he said he didn't know, but he had confronted Charlie and had cut ties for good. Lying. Charlie claimed all had been solved, and he was now on probation. I met the lady. Her name was Frances, and she was hostile, standoffish, and showed a superiority complex. She owned a yacht, multiple real estate, and had presence across several states. I left when the meeting was over without an actual resolution. She hardly mentioned anything about software. Frances talked a big game on other topics. I researched her and found lots of questionable information. I asked Dean directly if she was in any way connected to Charlie. He offered a vague answer. I don't know, it could be. When I pressed for a yes or no, he said, "I can't compromise the integrity of my success by indulging in your unfounded assumptions." His business was drying up. He saw Frances as his savior. She engaged him to help her set up one of her big companies and would pay him $750,000 total. She would also pay him $2,000 a week for 6 months just to do some company creation work. I had a software engineer to install a new system. Our initial intention was to get Dean's software up and running to avoid the additional cost of a new installation. The engineer informed me that the software could not possibly run because it was a knockoff from an outdated system. He advised me to file a complaint for fraud. I didn't want to get my niece involved. I just wanted her out of that place. By then, Dean was actively trying to insert himself in his client's business. He made stupid decisions based on getting an undetermined percent of what we achieve. Companies shied away from him and his snake oil tactics. Some more research led me to the conclusion that Dean had inflated his company's capacity for specialty software. So he also inflated the price, took $2,000 for himself, and gave Charlie $8,000 to get whatever garbage they could sell me. This is exactly why I could not get my $8,000 back. Frances was their source of software. I notified Dean that due to the nature of his relationship with a felon, we were canceling all remaining services. My niece got fired that afternoon, and Dean's excuse was her refusal to give Charlie a ride. Emma came to me and my husband. She was scared and very emotional. She explained that when I gave Dean my canceling notice, she was in his car and was about to get off and enter the office. Dean slammed the door so hard the car shook. She was so perplexed, it took her a few seconds to get out, so Dean opened the door, yelled, "Effing move!" The situation with Charlie had also escalated. Emma addressed this at work, but Dean's response was, "Grow up, toughen up. How do you expect to make it in this cutthroat world if you're gonna be so sensitive?" Charlie's jokes became overtly sexual and explicit. There was one incident months earlier. Charlie was drunk after yet another failed business meeting. Dean ordered Emma to drive Charlie home. He tried to assault her during the ride. He claimed he couldn't remember, therefore it never happened. This time, she refused to be Charlie's driver and potential victim. Dean fired her after ranting about how Charlie was being targeted by losers and faithless know-it-alls. He got into a power trip and became verbally abusive, calling her a Miss Goody Two-Shoes and reminding her that she had been able to eat the whole time she worked for him because he paid her out of pity. He emailed her that due to her insubordination, lack of honesty, and malicious manipulation, her duties were terminated effective immediately. My husband and I supported her. We paid a good lawyer. This was no longer just about money. I went straight to the restaurant where Dean and Charlie routinely held their meetings. I confronted Dean in front of his clients and warned Charlie that his luck had ended. Next time I see him, he would need to fillet himself. I became very attentive to detail. I researched all types of records and found that Charlie had jumped probation and the arrest warrant was still in effect. The legal system had failed miserably at finding him. He had felonies in multiple states, and the supposed time doing business overseas was actually jail time. Emma provided her case on harassment, and Dean had to pay $15,000 in owed salary and punitive damages, and had to pay some fines. I contacted as many of his former fired employees as possible via Facebook and encouraged them to sue. 3 of them actually did. 1 of them won. I wanted him under legal and financial strain. He was ordered to refund my money plus legal costs. The judge didn't accept his "but it's Charlie's fault" excuse. My contract was direct with Dean, not Charlie. He also had to pay me for breach of confidentiality because Charlie wasn't his employee nor a legally bound business partner. The court opened a new investigation over potential financial fraud and theft of information, identity, etc., as Dean had access to clients' accounting and payroll information with lots of data. A new order of apprehension was issued against Charlie, but he ran. The judge ordered Dean's business permanently closed. A forfeiture notice was issued. I saw on his Facebook business page an announcement that Dean had been invited as a guest lecturer in a nearby college. Funny, because Dean never actually finished college, and I knew this from the beginning. I contacted them and voiced my concern over an unqualified professor teaching at their institution. I leaked his lack of academic standing by trolling their propaganda. They ended up announcing a different professor for the course without further explanation. During that fall, a former coworker called my niece to give her the news that Francis had been arrested by the feds for a fraud scheme. Not related to my revenge, but still sweet. The best part is that she stopped paying the $2,000 a week early on, but kept stringing him along for free work. I sent a formal notice to all the companies I had referred to him and explained that I could no longer recommend his services. I added a copy of our own lawsuit. Companies were dropping like flies. Other lawsuits strung along for dishonest services. This set a chain of events that led to his downfall. He had some car repo situations back when the business began to fail. I called the company and told them where to find him and what time. That was easy because although by now he had closed shop, he and Charlie kept eating at the same restaurant. I wasn't there to see it, but confirmed the car was towed. His marriage broke apart. He faced charges for selling and profiting from illegal software. He got probation. He lost his home and illegally occupied a portion of the abandoned commercial building next to his former location. I leaked this info to an anti-gentrification regional Facebook group. The zone was under scrutiny because residents were being pushed away. He used the spot as a small office and living quarters. The residents wanted it as a community center. They held a protest right in front. The police came. He was charged with trespassing and stealing electricity from a nearby building. Goodbye probation. Charlie was harder to nail. He disappeared for years. I could not find him. Again, he later gained confidence. His social media became moderately active. He claimed to own some bogus business. He never appeared in any of his picture posts. I wondered whether he was posting from inside of jail or something. I went to his aunt's profile. She posted regularly. Some pictures showed him doing family gathering stuff. I found out via her comments that he now had a young child, and his legs were amputated from too much drinking and poor control over his blood sugar. Same bad person. Freaking liar. Picture caption, "Happy birthday, dear son, even though cold-hearted people are keeping us apart." I found out he had an unpaid child support case. I anonymously contacted both the baby mama and the child support division. I gave them everything. His aunt's address and every freaking place I knew he visited. He was arrested and new charges were filed, including sexual battery, I don't know about this one, and financial abuse of a mentally ill adult. I only recovered $3,000 out of the $8,000 he took. My case against him lasted almost 2 years, but seeing him all pale and listening to his trembling voice during the court hearings was more than enough. The case took a toll on his already weakened health. His hands trembled. He cried and got ill when he was sentenced. He just kinda dropped his head and became super pale. Then he motioned his head to each side and shivered as he got help from the medics. I remember the judge's opening sentence was, "I'm tired of this case. In over 10 years, I've read your name in multiple warrants, and yet you avoid responsibility, forcing us to spend taxpayer money on tracking you. What's wrong with you? You plead and bring up your health problems, but none of that deterred you from stealing, abusing, and debilitating the integrity of those under your influence." I smiled at his face as many times as I could when the judge wasn't looking. He served 4 years out of a 36-year sentence and died in 2019. It does sound here like Dean could have had a very successful business if he didn't get involved with this idiot Charlie. Unfortunately though, some people are very impressionable and very easily get led on by others, and it doesn't work out in their favor. Now, one thing I noticed with this story was that there was a whole bunch of different types of revenge, a bunch of different things happening that we might have heard in stories previously. Sounds like it might be a little embellished. I believe that some of this happened, but I think that OP listened to a lot of other revenge stories and brought some things from those and put them into this. But I'd love to hear your guys' comments, so down below, do you think this is a completely true story? Do you think it's only partly true? Or do you think it's absolute BS? I'd love to hear your opinions. Our next story today comes to us from Sunny KL. Dispute over an alarm clock ends a career. Let's jump right in. A recent petty revenge story made me remember this experience from my teenage years, but this one definitely went all the way to pro. Strap in, it's going to be long. So just before my senior year in high school, I turned 18 and bought a car with my saved up years of babysitting money. I'd have liked one sooner, but my mother absolutely refused. At 18, in my big act of teenage rebellion, I went out and bought one. A couple months later, Auntie Butthole suddenly left her job from several states away and moved in with us, without her car. It cost less if she waited 6 months until spring to get it shipped. Something about snowbird travel patterns. She was cheap and a user as well as a butthole. As a result, I was expected to share my recently acquired car with Auntie Butthole until hers arrived. This seemed deeply unfair, but nonetheless, it was agreed upon that she could use it for appointments and job interviews since I could take the school bus. I needed to be warned in advance because my bus stop was the second one of the route. It left a lot earlier than I needed to if driving direct, and I liked sleep. You may be wondering about now what this has to do with an alarm clock. Auntie Butthole is one of those people who likes to rile people up, then mock them for getting pissed off. She always got a complaint, harsh word, and is feuding with somebody over something. Once she moved in with us, her complaint was my alarm clock. My room shared a wall with hers. The alarm was waking her mooching, unemployed broke butt up every morning, and that pissed her off. Couldn't I just go to bed earlier so I didn't need an alarm clock? The morning schedule at our house went something in the ballpark of this. 5:30 a.m., my workaholic mother leaves for the office. 5:45 a.m., my alarm goes off if taking the bus to school. 6:15 a.m., my alarm goes off if driving to school. 6:15, I leave if taking the bus to school. 6:45, I leave if driving to school. 1/2 past never, Auntie Butthole's employed Tushy needs to be anywhere. Auntie Butthole approached my workaholic mother about the horrific inconvenience of my using an alarm clock. Her solution was that my mother should wake me up every day at 5:30 before leaving. My mother told her to try earplugs or work it out between us. Workaholic mother was massively non-confrontational and wanted no part of Auntie Butthole's dispute. Auntie Butthole started sneaking into my room to unplug the clock after I fell asleep. I'm a hard sleeper, so she pulled this off a few times. I had a good number of tardies before I figured out it wasn't the new cat who initially got blamed. Woke up to see her standing over my bed one night. Creepy. I screamed like a banshee, waking the whole house. She claimed sleepwalking, and my mother let her get away with that lame excuse. I endeavored to solve the problem myself with some super glue. Not the brightest move I made. That house got sold with a bonus electric blue alarm clock, and Auntie Butthole started turning the alarm off instead of unplugging it. So I started sleeping with my alarm clock tucked behind my pillow. No way Auntie Butthole could do anything to it without waking me now. She was pissed at having not gotten her way and never let anything go ever. Auntie Butthole's next move was to get up when the alarm went off and race into the only bathroom with a shower. It was closer to her room than mine, so she always beat me there. She'd stash magazines in there to sit on the commode, reading until right around 6:20. This is after the school bus has left, but still before I need to leave driving direct. Once I was taking a very rushed shower, she'd steal my keys and take my car, wherever the heck the unemployed go to drive around all day. She claimed that I just wasn't paying attention when she said she needed the car. She wasn't telling me. When my mother wasn't around, she made snide remarks that if she was woken up, she had just as much right to the bathroom as I did. I could solve this problem by not waking her up. In addition to this, she would take my car evenings and weekends, always right before I had babysitting gigs. It never returned with more than fumes in the gas tank. She had to call roadside assistance twice for running out of gas because she'd guessed wrong on how far she could get on fumes. Needless to say, I was pissed. Also massively inconvenienced and a lot poorer. I had to beg friends for last-minute rides or take a cab. She continued to blame me, and my mother stayed out of it. We got into a cat and mouse game with my keys, where I eventually kept them on me at all times, even in the shower. This was an old car some years back. No electronic keys were harmed. The keys came in the shower with me because the counter wasn't enough to stop her from pulling the bathroom lock, pocket door, trivial, and coming in while I was showering to take them. Again, creepy. This eventually resulted in her asking in advance to borrow my car for a job interview that probably wasn't. She went to the key shop and got my car keys copied. The next day, my keys safely back in my possession, she pulls the shower stunt again. She did it a lot, even when she wouldn't take my car. Auntie Butthole was a butthole. I head out to the driveway, keys in hand, and my car's not there. Legit thought she'd hotwired it until I got home and it showed no signs of tampering. I'm not much for poking the bear, but it was time to have this out. Auntie Butthole quite smugly admitted to copying the key, called me a selfish bee who didn't know how to share, and many other unfortunate things I don't remember exactly. She wasn't giving it back. What was I going to do? I warned her that car was mine, and she did not have permission to use it ever again. This was a bridge too far for me. There would be consequences. She laughed in my face. The next morning, my car was not in the driveway. I'd expected this. My best friend's dad was a cop. I was practically a fixture in his house for a decade, and he was the closest thing I had to a father figure due to my own deadbeat dad. So I gave him a call, utterly distraught that the car I've worked so hard to get has been stolen from my driveway. He's very sympathetic. Did I mention the car had LoJack? It was actually a very nice car, back when it was new anyway. We do all the reporting and whatever it takes for the cops to find it with LoJack. By mid-afternoon, they'd found it in the parking lot of an outlet mall. I don't know what the full details of the encounter were, as I've heard multiple versions of this part of the story over the years. She had some kind of crazy bee tizzy on them upon being accused of theft, including a tussle with an officer. It ended in charges of grand theft auto, resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, and some kind of license-related thing because she'd never switched it to her new state of residence. don't throw a bee tizzy at a cop, they don't like it much. As this all took some time, she didn't get arraigned that day. As her unemployed broke butt had horrid credit and little money, she couldn't make bail. As I deleted her answering machine message begging my mother to come bail her out, my workaholic mother didn't even notice she was gone for almost a week. Once workaholic mommy did notice, I explained that my car had been stolen and I called the cops. I was handling the situation myself like she suggested. The look of dawning horror was amazing. Then she shrugged and went back to avoiding all confrontation. Auntie Butthole served 2 weeks in county lockup until she took a plea deal. I suspect they slow-walked her paperwork a bit. What happened after was glorious revenge. Auntie Butthole's remaining savings were used up all on the fines and court fees, so she finally got around to shipping her car and engaging in a job hunt. One problem, she was previously a teacher. She'd yet to get her certification in her new state. Now she had a rap sheet and was unable to pass the background check. Whoops, time for a new career as a telemarketer. Auntie Butthole didn't bother me much after that. I learned years later she only went after kids hard, and I had proved enough of an adult she realized there were consequences for her actions. We spent the next few months ignoring each other before I headed to college. And that's how a dispute over an alarm clock ended Auntie Butthole's teaching career. Now, OP added an edit on to the end of the story. It says, edited to answer a few repeat questions. What's up with your mother? Mental illness. She was not a bad person. She simply had almost no capacity to deal with conflict and retreated into her work as a coping mechanism. With time and understanding, I am sympathetic to her role. She has since passed away. Why didn't you call the cops sooner? I had never dealt with anybody so lacking boundaries like Auntie Butthole before. I genuinely thought there was a limit, and I just had to handle things until we got there in the name of family harmony. It was also supposed to be temporary. I had college coming up quick, and she was supposed to find a job and apartment, so it was very time-bounded. It's the nuclear option to call the cops on a family member, and a very scary thing to contemplate at 18 years old. I also wasn't sure it would work, given she would claim I was confused about permission, and the chances my mother would back me up were close to zero. Once I still had my keys in hand and no car in the driveway, that was a game changer in my eyes. Can we get more of an epilogue? There's not a lot to say. I went no contact with Auntie Butthole after leaving for college. Between her prison stint and my departure, she ignored me and I returned the favor. I found out later that she only seriously picks on kids. I'd proved myself an adult who could deliver consequences for her actions. Now I spend holidays with my husband's lovely family and visit the stable family members at other times. Okay, hold up a second. This person's career revolved around ensuring the success of students. And then she tried to ruin a student's future. OP, I think you did the school system a favor. You put her where she needed to be. It sounds like this woman has absolutely no business in a classroom around students. Our next story today comes to us from Singer is a Crook. Treat me like crap for almost 2 years for minimum wage. I reach my breaking point and get my friends to quit with me, causing my former boss, who was also area manager, to lose his job. Let's jump right in. So I worked for a Dunkin' Donuts in my hometown starting around February 2016 and worked till around midsummer last year. My boss and area manager, we'll call Big B, was an unprofessional and horrible boss. I was still in high school at the time, and he only gave me weekends for months on end, occasionally giving me a weekday just to clean the store like a monkey. Big B was a butthole to say the least. He'd treat us workers like we were dogs, and he would be noticeably annoyed when a customer would take a long time to order. Or when we'd F up an order, he would two-face us, tell the customer that he's sorry that we F'd up. Then, when the customer would leave, he'd make snarky remarks about her to us like we were in on berating her. Stupid butt lady don't know what she want, man. When it got busy, we're supposed to work as a team, but when it gets busy, he'd yell at us and tell us to hurry up, which would put us all in a bad mood, and we'd actually work slower and decrease throughput value. When it came to making pack out, which was when we'd restock the sandwich station and the freezer, he would work without wearing gloves, which was unsanitary. Made donuts and baked goods like that too, no gloves. He would get complaints, but his boss who owned the store wouldn't do anything about it. so he'd get away with unsanitary workmanship. This doesn't matter now because he'd just make me do it mostly every day in the summer. So when summer came around, I got more hours, which was nice, but stressful beyond belief. After summer ended, he offered me the opening coordinator position because he had no one else and I needed more hours and money, so I took the offer. I had to wake up at 2 a.m. every morning to go open the store and bake all the goods and make extra donuts before the store would open at 4 a.m. And I needed money, so I didn't complain. But it got too stressful when he would constantly berate me because he'd come in at 4 a.m. to help out with the customers, but he'd make me help the customers. He'd then yell at me for not finishing on time. I got $8.75 an hour to come in and bake. My two good friends, both named David, needed a job, so I hooked them up to work at Dunkin' because I thought I would have extra help now for morning baking. But of course, they get put on customer service, and seeing how B would treat them disgusted me. He treated them like they were brainless monkeys, and I started to question why I was doing this to myself. I got a second job at a hotel as a bellman, and I was treated so much better. The two Davids got jobs there too, and we all pulled two jobs for a while. Then, midsummer 2017, after a year of baking and getting up 6 days a week at 2 a.m. just to now start leaving at 6 a.m. to go to the hotel, I decided that I was working for the wrong man. I up and left the store at 5:30 a.m. before B comes. I told my coworkers that I loved working with them, but I just can't do it. I left, rode home on my bike, and called both Davids. Told them both not to come in, and that I was sorry that they had to go through his insults on how they were so slow. Later that week, one of my other coworkers gets fired by him because she finally snapped on him. Then, another coworker just left because I sent her a big long paragraph on why she should quit. She heeded my word and left. I've been gone from Dunkin' since the summer. Today I had orientation for a new job, and I offered to give a sweet old lady a ride home because she lived in the same town and we'd be working at the same store together. Turns out her daughter works at Dunkin', and I heard Big B got fired because of the mass loss of workers. It was the best thing I've heard in a long time. He treated me and my coworkers like crap. Unsanitary piece of crap is gone. This happens all the time in low-paid jobs, be it fast food or even retail. The manager treats their staff like crap, but as long as things are running properly, they don't get reprimanded. In fact, the upper management generally won't even look at the store if they're pulling the proper numbers. Just remember, your time is the most valuable asset you have, and if you could be putting that time to better use, then you should go and do that. If that means quitting a job and going to work somewhere else, then so be it, because you need to do what you can do to get ahead in life. Our next story today comes to us from Cocktails Perfected. We've all had bad bosses before, right? Let's jump right in. Not sure if this is pro-revenge or petty revenge, but I figure I'd post it here. This doesn't paint me in a great light, but I was 18 or 19 at the time and a dick. About 8 or 9 years ago, I worked retail in a small outdoor goods store, 6 members of staff small, ski stuff in the winter, camping, hiking in the summer. I wasn't passionate about it, but a job's a job. The woman who hired me left pretty soon after I started. She got a job that was in the field of her degree, and she left the store in the care of the supervisor at the time, Lauren. Lauren was the kind of girl we have all had the poor fortune to deal with at some point. Irresponsible, held power over you when it suited her, and tried painfully hard to be your best friend the next. Annoying at best as a supervisor, but abusive with her power as a manager. She started changing people's shifts, so she was never in the store during peak hours. She'd take the easy shifts when the store was dead, and would spend her time hanging out in the back office, doing important paperwork, read, sitting on her phone, or reading a magazine. Then she'd start hiring her friends as and when they wanted to work. The staff ended up turning into a conveyor belt of hot topic wannabe models. A few of them were okay, but I remember one of them working a night shift, covering a close for Lauren, and closing early, emptying the till, and never being seen again. Lauren later said she'd only known him a week before hiring him. The worst thing she did, though, was abuse the 3-month probation rule. Off the top of my head, they went through 8 different members of staff over the course of 5 months. That might not sound like a lot, but in a store of 6 employees, it wasn't a small amount. A member of staff would be hired and would be doing great, and then all of a sudden, "I'm sorry, we don't need your services anymore," and they were gone. "It's just not working out," vanished. "I just don't think you're the right fit for this role," disappeared. No notice period, nothing, just gone. I found out during one of her "please like me" spells that the area manager hadn't actually promoted her to be a full manager yet. He wanted to make sure she was the best option for the role. She basically thought that so long as no one else lasted long enough to shine better than her, she'd get the manager role and all perks that come with it. We then hired a woman called Kirsty, who was in her mid-late 30s and was a great person. Enthusiastic, a team player, great with customers. I mean, pretty much exactly what you want in a manager. However, when it was just me and Lauren would go off on how she doesn't like Kirsty, how she's thinking about getting rid of her unless her attitude improved, etc. And I decided to step in. I got my phone and hit record as Lauren went on another rant later on. "Here's the thing Kirsty doesn't get. I'm in charge. I can fire whoever I want. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if I was taking over from that fat bellend of an area manager we have now in a year," etc, etc. I just let her talk, only responding with "really? Oh yeah?" That night, I sent the video to Kirsty, telling her to make sure she was on her best behavior, but she ended up taking the issue up with the area manager. He came to the store, called Lauren out, told her that in the time she'd been in charge, the store had lost somewhere in the region of $15,000 to $20,000. They had to get the police involved against her friend who stole from the tills, and our store for some reason had one of the highest turnover rates in the country. He fired her on the spot. Kirsty ended up taking over as manager, and the store finally started turning a profit. Managers who like to talk about all the employees behind their backs are honestly some of the best ones you can have when you want to destroy them. As was the case in this story, if a manager says something about a coworker, I would go to that coworker and let them know, because they might get really angry with it and do something about it. And if you're not the kind of person who's going to take down the manager yourself, maybe they are.